My name is Devon Sherwood. I currently am working for the New York Mets. I work in our alumni public relations department where I manage the relationship between our former players and the organization. As you know, baseball teams, baseball is very, very big into history, and the sport is heavy on that side. So we maintain relationships, myself, along with our vice president of alumni public relations and team historian, Jay Horowitz. We maintain a relationship between our former players and the organization. We like to bring players back, whether it be for entertainment for our fans, to have them see one another, and generally just keeping them in the Mets family. That's a very important part of any organization that you want to make people, whether they've working with you currently or whether they're not part of the team anymore, that they always know that they're part of that family. So that's one of my main responsibilities in the role I'm in now. I've been doing that for the past 2.5 to, I want to say, about 3 years at this point. And for 3 years prior to that, I worked in our marketing and communications group that actually I acted as an assistant to our senior vice president. So I was in on a number of different projects, whether related to anything along the marketing side, communications, PR side, our production side, or social media. So it kind of was an all encompassing job, ensuring that all the sub departments that I just mentioned all were working well with one another. And before my 6 years at the Mets that I'm coming up on now, I worked in the Washington, D.C. for the Washington Wizards and Capitals on the sales side. So the parent company to those two teams are Monumental Sports and Entertainment, and they have a number of different teams underneath that wing, whether it be, like I said, the NBA with the Washington Wizards, NHL, the Washington Capitals, the WNBA, the Washington Mystics. And since I've left, they've actually acquired, I believe, an indoor football team amongst some of the other entertainment acts that happen in that venue. So I was on the sales side, and I figured I wanted to get a little bit of experience on that end. So that was my introduction to the sports industry. So my interest in ethics started when I was really young. I took a couple of courses in college, and learning about one's moral principles of, or a company's values was always something that was intriguing to me. Um, Once you understand a set of morals, you get a clearer picture of how processes are created and why decisions are made. Um, with that being said, that same concept can be attributed to race and diversity within any sport. Why does that sport look the way it does? With regard to its athletes and its fans, what kind of marketing does that sport particularly do? Who do they advertise to? So I think my interest in ethics helps me dive a bit deeper than what may be on the surface. So that, I believe, helps me understand a little bit better in terms of the issues of race and diversity that are present and have always been present within sport. So that's kind of how the two intertwine for me. I think acknowledgement be the key word. That life doesn't stop once you step on a field or step on a court or step on a rink. That even the consumer, our fans, have to understand that these athletes are real people too. You know, our women and men athletes have to know that they're real people and that they have real feelings. And in my opinion, I was a sociology major during my undergraduate studies. So I always had an interest of society and how society interacts with one another. And I believe sport and society have always been intertwined. Um, Eventually, events, movements, some that we've seen over this past year that occur within society always spill over into the sports world. It's always been the case, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. So I'm a big believer that sports is a reflection of society, no matter where you are, whether you're in North America, whether you're in Europe, or whether you're in Africa or Asia, or whether you're in South America. I believe that an acknowledgement, a general acknowledgement, that's how we make sure that of our athletes that they're real people. That's how we make sure we start to develop a culture where athletes know it is a safe space for them to speak about their struggles, because a lot of times athletes are afraid to talk about what they truly are experiencing because they don't want to lose their livelihood. I think the common man and woman that works a 9 to 5, that's part of the reason why they may not intimate certain things on the job because they don't want to lose their job. Well, the same applies to our athletes. And even though our athletes are making more than the common person, they don't want to lose that income. So I think the more that we can create a safe space for those said athletes, and the more we can have recognize that they too are in fact people with emotions and go through very much of the same similar issues that you and I may go through on a day to day. The more that they know that they're in that same kind of space, the better it is for them to feel more comfortable to not only express themselves but act in a genuine way. I believe the Mets are attacking issues of diversity and inclusion. I think our leadership has done a great job. They've done a great job of keeping the lines of communication open. Obviously, with these events of this past year, and at least in America, there's been more of a step up on that. And there's been an acknowledgement on our leadership behalf that we would like to continue to build out our culture where everyone feels valued and seen and heard. And they've been doing a wonderful job of that lately. So yeah, I do think that they're doing enough. Um, they've instituted our employees have instituted our business resource groups, which have been great because there have been safe spaces for our various groups. We have several, about 7 to 8 BRG groups to discuss issues that are specific to their realities and their needs. Um, and out of these BRG groups, there have been a number of different initiatives that have been created and that have already had impacts within our community here in New York City. Um, but on top of the initiatives, is creating an environment um, where naturally and organically we've gotten to know our colleagues on a personal level. I can't stress that enough. When you know who you're working with, maybe not to the core, but when you know that person, who they are, what they like, their tendencies, the more you're able to be that much better of a colleague or a teammate to them. So the same thing, same kind of process that happens within the office is the same reason why certain teams excel on the rink or excel on the court or excel on the field, because they know their teammate, they know what they do well, they have an understanding as to what they like and why they like what they like. And that same kind of idea and concept can be crossed over into the office. So um, I think our BRGs have an institution of our BRGs have gone a long way while still allowing privacy for its employees, because they know it's a safe space. They know they're there to participate if they would like, or they could be there purely from a listening standpoint. Um, and like I said, as a company, we stepped it up a few notches and actively looking to foster an environment where everyone could be proud of. And to continue this work, the work never really truly stops. And we truly never really meet our goal, if we're going to be quite honest. But we do know that the work is always needed to be done because you truly never really arrive at this point of perfection. You're constantly working towards it. And I think that pursuit of excellence, that constant pursuit of excellence, is a learned skill, and we're actively working on that within the Mets organization. So I'm full believers in our leadership that we have, and I'm just happy to be part of the organization and what we're doing right now currently. Lacrosse is a mostly white sport, and as a kid, I actually got involved in lacrosse at a very young age, purely due to my father. My father actually played lacrosse. He got introduced to the sport when he was in high school. So I guess I didn't have a choice into whether I was going to play or not. And but I was always the one African American kid on the team, or if not one, then certainly one of two or just three max. So I always recognized I was othered in the sport, or labeled as other in the sport. In terms of tackling issues of diversity, um, they have a long way to go. I know that historically, the U.S. lacrosse, United States lacrosse organization, they've tried to, at different points in times, invest in programs and resources to increase access to the sport. in their times, they've used their media assets as a platform to advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But a little has been done over the years in terms of addressing racism within the organization or within the sport. And there have been a number of different stories that have come out over the past decades that point to that lack of addressing racism within the sport. I know as of this past July, August, the U.S. Lacrosse has created a DEI person, a DEI officer in the company, which is well overdue. And I know they've tried to now implement policies where staffing has to interview a person of color or an indigenous candidate. And I know they've now put an instituted anti-racism policies and having lacrosse resources and content translated into other languages. But again, that's all great. I mean, you put it out on paper, but they have a long way to go. I think making the sport more accessible to kids in urban communities, to kids in rural communities that may not have the money to afford the expensive equipment or may not have the money to be a part of these travel teams. I think it's very much so a socioeconomic issue that lacrosse really has to pin themselves down on and get an idea as to how best to provide accessibility to the sport, because quite frankly, they're failing at that. And I think if they want their sport to continue to grow and really really put the sport on a platform and deliver it to people who otherwise may not know about the sport, they would have to really try to solve that accessibility issue first, and affordability in terms of not only be able to afford to purchase the equipment, but afford to even play in these tournaments. Stereotypes certainly do limit our view of people. I think what needs to be done actually to prevent stereotypes in both media and society will be more representation of the different kind of athletes that we have within the multitude of sports. There isn't one type of an athlete. You know, there are a number of different women that are playing in WNBA that have a slew of different interests, and they shouldn't be typecasted into one box. I know myself as a Black athlete in lacrosse, I would be typecasted into a certain box, whether it was correct or not. But I think that problem gets solved personally to me when there's more representation, when a young girl sees someone that looks like her playing in this particular sport, or looks like her and is broadcasting the football game, or somewhere along those lines. That's really important, because one of my favorite quotes that I've heard in the past is, "Our limits are extended to our vision," and you can only do what you see. So I'll repeat that again. Our limits are only extended to our vision. You can only So essentially you can only do what you see or dream. And if you don't see it, and if you don't experience that dream, then that's not possible because you're not thinking about it. So I think representation is a major part of how we can start to diminish stereotypes both in the media and in society. Because if you only see one thing, from people, then that's going to be the expectation, right or wrong. I think, but once we're older, stereotypes are already set in, and for the most part, it's too late. So I think the more that we can have younger kids see themselves and see different aspects of different people, the better it is. Because when you get older, stereotypes are already ingrained consciously and or subconsciously. I would say access, because none of this happens without access. You have to be in the room for someone to acknowledge your presence, if that makes any sense. That is also a part. It's a part of inclusion, being in that shared space and having that shared opportunity for equal access to opportunities. But that also relates to accountability, um, access, um, because if you have access to something, then said company has to understand that not only do you have the access, but they have to hold themselves accountable that they're giving you equal opportunity. Um, a lot of times, what you may see from an organization, let's say the NCAA, last month, when they had a terrible gaffe where the equipment that was given and the setup that was given to our female basketball players was nothing like what was given to our male basketball players. Our female athletes work just as hard. They put in the same amount of hours, if not more, yet they don't have the same kind of facilities. And the NCAA had pie in their face, and they came out the next day and apologized and said that that wouldn't happen. But that's accountability. Yes, I could be mad at the NCAA, but I cannot say that they didn't hold themselves accountable for that. So I think access is one a word that would come to my mind when it comes what I think is needed in order to change when it comes to accountability and inclusion. Because if we don't have the access, then nothing's going to happen regardless. Because that means that the good intention wasn't there in the first place, that the access was not allowed or granted. The ability to recognize that with power comes responsibility, and that leadership often good leadership often has accountability. um, Recognizing that with power comes responsibility, and it's easier said than done. I think we all like it when things are going well, but it takes a true leader, it takes a true solid, strong culture to have accountability across the board, from leadership to managers to coordinators to coaches to players. And that has to be a certified staple of any kind of positive culture, particularly when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. With regards to diversity, we are truly at our best, no matter where you are in this world. We're truly at our best when we have diversity, whether it be along the lines of race, whether it be along the lines of ideology, um, you name it, whether it be along the lines of gender. We are all that much better with each other. Um, and it's a proven formula that has been successful over the course of history. And having differing thoughts, differing ideology, differing cultures, differing experience always brings a set of fresh eyes and ears to a situation. It also makes the team better, whether it be on the playing field or within an office. Um, it's imperative. It's imperative, and the diversity more often sometimes gets actually intermixed. Uh, Sometimes diversity gets sometimes confused with the inclusion. Sometimes people believe it's the same, but in fact, but it isn't. Um, and I think the more that our leadership, from all walks of our lives, whether it be in the sports world or in the corporate world, the more we understand the differences between the three, the better off that we'll be. But in the inclusion of sport, I think when it comes to media has done a great job of pointing out different points of times where inclusion is missing. And these different sports, let's say lacrosse, has been called out for it, and good, because if you truly want to see your sport get to um, its best possible position, and if you enjoy the sport, you want to share the sport with others because it's treated you well or it's gotten you to places where otherwise you may have not. So why not share that? Why not give someone else an opportunity to have an opportunity to get the same kind of results that you had? So exclusivity when it comes to opportunities within sport are also imperative, um, because if we don't have diversity or inclusion, we certainly won't have equity, um, and that would ultimately be the finish line. in terms of where we would like to go. We would like to see our respective sports be, not only for our athletes, both men and women, but for our people that work behind the scenes that make the engine go. So that will be my take on when it comes to accountability, diversity, and inclusion. Because when all that happens, I think we achieve equity, but that's something that we constantly have to work on. It isn't something that becomes a fad or something that becomes the thing to do. But that's something that we constantly work on and look to improve, because as we get more and more experience, we do a little bit more diving, we recognize different areas that we had blind spots for, and we can continue to work on those blind spots. A famous NBA player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I'm gonna mess up his exact quote, but he referred to racism as kind of lint. And you don't see it, but once it's in the light, you can see it, and you constantly have to brush it off. You constantly have to clean it off, and that's the same kind of approach we need to take when it comes to our D&E and I efforts. For me, it comes down to access, representation, accessibility. Uh, that's what stands out to me. We're now not perfect as humans, as institutions of sport, leagues. We're not perfect, but as long as we have the good intentions, our best intentions, in order to um, create environment, create a culture that we like to share what we prize so much with someone else. So, as a marketer or as a public relations person that I professionally am, I want to be able to convey a message to our fans or potential fans of why you should be here, or why you should tune in, why I would like this young girl, young boy to participate in this sport, because it's given so much to me. So I want to share this gift with you. Um, so when it comes to me, the key words are access, accessibility, accountability, diversity, and inclusion. And that's kind of what I like to have in the back of my mind when I am trying to speak to a large group of people, whether I'm promoting an event, or whether I have a certain initiative in mind. I want to have a diverse number of people that are around me that are included within the process, that might have different thoughts, different ideology, different experience. Because the more voices in the room that we have that are all for one common goal, the better the product and the better the outcome and the better the messaging will be. Um, and the more that we stick to um, that kind of a concept, the better our results are going to be. And the more that we are really married to that concept of inclusion, and equity, the better off that we'll be. Because not only will our product be better, but our culture will be better, our values will be definitive and wouldn't be questioned. And that's going to lead to a lot of different wins on the field and off the field. So that would be my brief summary, and my idea as to how we can maximize how we can maximize ourselves within our respective industries, whether you're in basketball, football, hockey, lacrosse, or volleyball. Um, all those ideas and all those kind of terms I just mentioned all lead to creating a more inclusive environment.